Okay, good morning to you. Good morning to you who are here already. It's very nice to see you. We're going to, I'm sure you're well accustomed to this by now, but we're just going to hang on a couple of minutes to let people arrive on this Sunday morning. Please do let me know where you are, who you are, where you are. If you're here just for interest, or if indeed you might well be considering writing in a second language, you might well write in a second language. Please do let me know. I don't know about you, but I've really enjoyed this lobby experience of going into the various rooms, and also this amazing thing about the catch-up, because I'm sure, like you know, it can not always work out that you can be somewhere live, but you can. I think it's 3 months they're up for all these things, so that's great. Hello, Mary. You're here just for fun from London and learning Italian. Well done. Whilst this is a specific, I'm going to be specifically talk. Buongiorno dal Belgio. Ciao Lorenzo. I'm going to be talking about Italian specifically. Obviously, these things are, I think, applicable generally. That was my idea, is to try and make them. It's language specific for me because it's Italian, but actually, I think these things can be used in any language. Magdalena from Spain, hello. Claire in Toscana, ciao da Toscana, lucky you. So we're international already. This is good. This is what we like. Right, where are we? 2 minutes. Let's just wait for just another minute. Hello, Kieran. Another Londoner. Okay, lots of people popping in now. Thank you. Salve, Luca. So you're from Sorrento, but you're in Kidderminster. Bravo. And Emerson, hello, in London. What a swap, yeah. Sorrento, Kidderminster, Sorrento, Kidderminster. Yeah, I hear you, I hear you. Okay, let's put that down there for the minutes. So I think I'm gonna make a start, okay, so that's all right. So let's just get this going. So there we are. Actually, I'm just going to hang on 1 second. Come out of there just for 1 minute, excuse me. Okay, so here we go. Good morning to everybody. Welcome to you all. Thank you very, very much for being here. If you're watching live or if you're watching on catch up, I'd like to actually thank the Language Show for this lovely opportunity to talk to you. And I hope you find some inspiration or ways of moving forward with your language learning. And you yourselves may even feel inspired to start writing. You may even be writing already, and I hope this might be of interest to you. But thank you for being here. I'm going to talk for about 30 minutes, between 30 and 35 minutes, not more than that. And there will be some questions for you along the way. And I hope you'll feel you'd like to comment on certain things. You may have points of view about certain things, and please do feel free to add your thoughts, and we'll look at those together in the last 10 minutes or so of this presentation via the Q&A or the comments, whichever one you want to throw them into. So as you see, I've called this talk Freeing Myself to Speak, because I hadn't realized really how imprisoned actually I had been in my own language. This familiarity I have with my mother tongue, English, meant I always felt I had nothing to say. That said, I had no idea that by learning a second language, I was going to find a new voice and a new way of looking at the world. And, you know, I'm sure we're well aware of, we as language learners and second language speakers, more than second languages, we have other languages, no doubt. And we are aware that you enter into other worlds. That is very well known. And that has certainly been the case for me with Italian. So I've just added some subtitles to an extract of an interview, just a little bit of an interview I did, which sums up my relationship between what is for me this second language and writing. Italiano perché chiaramente puoi sentire che io non sono italiano, sono inglese appunto. Sono una persona diversa, ho una libertà diversa quando parlo italiano. Io posso toccare forse argomenti che in inglese troverei difficoltà di esprimere. Quindi io ho trovato, per caso devo dire, perché stavo scrivendo semplicemente per migliorare la mia lingua italiana, ho scoperto questa voce diversa dalla mia solita voce inglese. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this. So my first thought really was this: how could the language in which you write affect what you create? So if you are if you write in any context, really, I write fiction, novels, but you might be writing in other worlds. If you are doing that, does that affect how you express yourself? Do you express yourself differently? Or if you don't do that, could you make an imaginative leap and think, how could the language in which you write affect what you create? So that's my first sort of question for you, and perhaps we could look at that later if anybody's got a thought about that. As I point out in the description of this event, I started learning the Italian language in 2010, and in November 21, this first Italian language novel was published. So that, as you can imagine, was quite an amazing thing. And of course, language is an emotional thing. It's really interesting watching all the talks. I've seen several talks here at the language show in many different aspects, EAL, reading, literature and translation. And they are all very passionate things. People are very passionate about them. It's an emotional connection. But of course, behind that, there are structures, there are technical structures, there's grammar, of course. So I'd just like to touch on some things that really, really helped me and informed me as a writer, which by chance, in some cases I did naturally, but now I realize it was a really helpful thing for me to have done if I had wanted to become a writer, even though this was something unexpected. And the first thing is to do with getting the authentic sound of, in my case, Italian speakers, that authentic sound of characters, perhaps, in a novel. So what I did was I asked some friends of mine I gave them 30 seconds to tell me something about their journey with English. These are Italian friends. And here's Julia. who's a digital specialist, as you see, and I'll just give you a chance to look at her bio. So let's just have a quick listen to Julia.
Hi, I'm Julia from Rome. To improve my English, I started watching my favorite series, which is The Office. First with English subtitles, then with English audio and subtitles. And it helped me a lot because I practiced simultaneously my listening, reading and comprehension whilst having fun. It was great.
So thanks for that, Julia. And here's Antonio, who's an archivist, who's an Italian working and living in London.
When I came to London, comprehension was the most difficult challenge. So I decided to avoid Italian. I didn't watch any movie, I didn't read any book, I just focused on English. So watching English TV or movies or listening to people from several backgrounds at work, on the bus, on the tube, going to theater, to the cinema, just listening. And that's how I improved my skills.
Thank you, Antonio. So that's my message there. It's about listening and re-listening. And I'm going to steal a thought of Vladimir Nabokov. Nabokov said that there is no reading, there is only rereading. And sort of you get that point. And I think that's the same. You know, we know that language learning is a complex of reading, writing, speaking, listening. I think listening is actually often quite neglected. Comprehension, I suppose, perhaps because it's the hardest one to get to, is neglected. And I think it's a good idea early on to always work on that. And whatever phase you're in, to always be working on listening. So listening, as I mentioned here, on the radio podcasts, favorite TV programs, as we heard Julia and Antonio describe. But that then provides you with, as I say, that authentic sound that I think you need, and it strongly affects your ability to capture natural speech. Now, all these things, I've heard this mentioned often in some of the talks, is that this is not something you arrive at suddenly. It requires insistence, and you can't buy insistence, of course. You can buy expertise and guidance, but progress will always feel slow. In fact, it slows down. You know, there's that the arc of learning a language, which is very steep, and then as you get more and more advanced, that kind of tails off. So, you know, that's a recognized phenomenon, and it takes a bit of courage, I think, to keep going day after day, week after week, year after year, with all those ups and downs and with all our complicated lives that we live. It is difficult, but actually that's the stamina that's needed for writing. You need to be able to push on through those days that are difficult, and need to do it pretty much every day. Not pretty much every day, I think every day. I'm being too generous. And that needs, again, something I've heard often in the talks, is it needs you to not be afraid of mistakes in writing. And I like this while we're in this literary frame of mind. This lovely saying by John Keats, and he was talking about literature, the ability to proceed in doubt. But of course, as all good sayings that have survived down the years, generally it's because they speak to a general idea that we all need the ability to proceed in doubt in all our various facets of our life. So I like that a lot. Let's carry on then with that. Another thing I found to be really important. And here we have Seba Pezzani, who's a translator, musician as well. And there's his bio. And here's what Seba has to say.
Hi, my name is Seba Pezzani. How did I start learning and improving my English? Well, I fell in love with the music of the Beatles, and it was a long journey. And then I started reading everything I could put my hands on. And that's very simple. And then obviously I tried to seize every opportunity I had to speak the language and to, catch all the different accents and way of saying. Here I am. Ciao.
Thank you, Seba. And here's Antonietta. And let's read her. She's a linguist. Read her bio. Now, Antonietta is actually interesting as well because she is a poet who writes, sometimes her poetry is in Italian, and she'll produce a translated version in English. Sometimes it's in English, and she'll produce a translated version in Italian, which is all rather wonderful. But here's Antonietta.
Ciao Royston. You know, very early on in my journey with the English language, so that's in secondary school, I used to keep a bilingual dictionary on my bedside table. So every night before sleeping, I would read a couple of pages as if it were a regular book.
Thank you, Antonietta. So there we are, rereading. Choose what you read carefully. All good writers are readers. Even if it's a dictionary, as Antonietta pointed out when she was younger, but all good writers are readers without doubt. And now here's something which I don't think is particularly widespread. I don't see this talked about very much. And that is the sense that when you are learning, I'm going to talk about Italian, thinking that if I want to read in Italian, I need to go straight to the nailed-on classics of Italian culture, the big works, Dante, Inferno, or I Promessi Sposi, di Manzoni, or Il Gattopardo, di Lampedusa. These are profoundly Italian books. And it's often the case that, oh, right, let's start reading in Italian. Okay, let's take one of these books. Well, no, I don't think that's a very good idea, because the context you need to have to really enter into those books is so formidable. It kind of gets in the way of the language learning. So I kind of spotted that. I made that mistake myself and thought, how can I get around this, having got to a reasonably proficient level of Italian? And it was actually the idea to take my favorite authors in English, Hanif Kureishi, Jonathan Coe, American writers, Gore Vidal, these writers who I've read extensively and deeply in English, and read them in translation. And then the context is all there. I don't need to understand the context because I understand the context, the British or American context. I have much more familiarity with that, so I can directly connect with the language. And that's how I then arrived. I'm only now, really, even after 10, 12 years, arriving at Italian text written by Italians. I'm now reading people, but modern people like Moravia, or more modern anyway, Moravia. I just finished a brilliant novel by Simonetta Agnello Hornby, which is set in Palermo in Sicily. But because for 12 years I've now been involved in the Italian culture, it's much less difficult. So that would be my thing about rereading reading is to inform your writing, is to push on with your own language in translation, first of all, for a period, and however long that period is obviously up to you. But this will give you a much more natural command in your second language again, because there's nothing worse than reading a book, and I'm sure you've come across them, where clearly the writer has just been had the thesaurus out, can't say the word in English, thesaurus out, and been using, just finding alternatives for a particular word. So that's something I think to be avoided. Just a couple of tiny little grammar things while we're just on this technical stuff, collocations and literalism. I just want to talk about collocations. Again, something I made mistakes with. So I just wanted to alert you to that fact. If you're going to write in a second language, collocations it's very important to know them. And collocations are, you know, are words that sit together and make sense. They don't necessarily have a grammatical reason, but they have a they occur because of the arbitrary choices made in a culture that form collocations. So if I think in English, clearly I'm thinking of things like we have heavy rain often. We have heavy rain, or we have light rain. We don't have thick rain. We don't have thin rain. We have, what else? We have high temperatures. We have low temperatures. We don't have tall temperatures or short temperatures. So those are examples of making mistakes with collocations. And it's a good idea to get to know the collocations that are strong and those that are weak. So a strong collocation would be something like a wish, make a wish, fulfill a wish. So I'm sure there are probably a couple more there, but I can't think of what they might be, but there are very few that fit with a wish. Whereas a word like big, you can attach to many, many things. So big apartment, big car, big house, big sky, big word, big disappointments, etc., etc., etc. So just very quickly, I just wanted to touch in on collocations. So another thought, a question, besides producing a novel, because, you know, I happen to be writing novels, but we're talking about writing in any key, in any register. What do you think might be the benefits of writing in a second language? What are they? What could they be? And because that also leads me on to this next thing here, this next thought. So let's just leave you just with that for a second. I like this thought by Théophile Gautier, obviously a French writer. I happen to read his couple of his novels in Italian, so I've written this out in Italian. Pensare una cosa e scriverne un'altra accade tutti I giorni, soprattutto alle persone virtuose. So a bit of irony here. So thinking one thing and writing another happens every day, above all to virtuous people. So just making a point about, this is one of the benefits I've noticed, that I can go further in this second language. Of course, fiction was invented, I write fiction. Fiction was invented to tell the truth about something. And therefore that in itself could be sufficient to write what you really are really thinking. Except I think it's even easier. It's made easier by writing in a second language, which gives you even more distance. I'm thinking here of Ian Forster, who said that you know, we all have the desire to know more, to feel more when writing, and that there is this, or I think there can be this feeling in one's own language that is so familiar that it becomes almost cliched, and you operate within the structures very clearly delineated and ordered and formalized of your own language, and breaking out of that into this almost like you're you know, a barbarian. That's probably not a good comparison, but in another language, there you are, and you have this complete freedom in this other language, which is so unfamiliar to you. You can kind of make mistakes with it and go with it and not be scared of it. That's what I found. And this leads me on to Jhumpa Lahiri. I'll just let you read that. So Jhumpa Lahiri is somebody who had written many novels in English. And then a few years ago, I think probably about 5-6 years ago, she switched to Italian herself. And she's just produced a first novel in Italian. I think there's short story collection out in Italian now as well. And this is exactly what I feel, and I think are the exciting possibilities for all of us, is that you're able to be a different person. You can see things differently. You can see things in a different way, in a different spirit, with a different state of mind. And I learnt late, so I make mistakes. Surely I certainly make mistakes. It's far from perfect, but that is a separate issue which can be worked out. I can sort out grammatical issues, technical issues later. The emotional freedom is the much more interesting thing. Let's just go back to some technical things. And here's Gabriele. Let's just read his biography. And here's Gabriele.
Hello. Whilst I think that it's very hard to focus on just one aspect that helped me improve my English skills, I think I would probably go with writing, and especially writing essays for the uni that I attended in the UK, because I think writing helped me focus on the mistakes that I was doing, helped me be more aware of the mistakes that I was doing, and especially helped me expand my vocabulary as well.
Thank you, Gabriele. So that point about expanding one's skills is so true. So rewriting is starting with the simplest things. I can remember struggling to compose a text or WhatsApp to some Italian friends. So one doesn't just start writing novels. Of course, you need to start in your target language at whatever level you need to start, and start to construct your way of writing the language. And clearly this has grammatical, technical benefits as well. In my case, I started keeping my diary, which I kept in English. I switched to Italian simply to improve the grammar, and discovered that there was a different level of sincerity that I was putting down, which then led to some thoughts about, I wrote some sort of short stories, ideas, which then expanded into a novel. So I'm really excited about these new kinds of languages. I remember watching an interview with Salman Rushdie, and he was talking about his friend Ishiguro, Katsuo Ishiguro, who tends to change his writing style about every 2 or 3 years. And Rushdie was saying, well, why do you do this? You build up a readership, and then you change direction. And Ishiguro said, well, that's my prerogative as an artist to do that. But it's also frees me up. It shakes up the patterns of my writing, and it's my job to teach my audience how to read. So that was a really interesting revelation to me. One more technical thing, just very, very quickly. This is to do with literalism, or the opposite of that, which would be correspondence. Something which I kind of didn't pick up on was the much more quickly, that is correspondence. So if I've got a nice quotation here from Kaori Fujimoto, who's talking about Japanese and English, which I really liked, which explains what I mean, really. What I found trickiest was that a literal English translation of Japanese wording is almost always awkward or incomprehensible. For example, a word-for-word translation of the English phrase, I didn't feel well, would be in Japanese, my body condition, feeling wasn't good. She brings out the worst in him would be, in her presence, his personality gets bad, and so on. So it's this thing about being aware of being literal and being correspondent. If I were to explain that in English, a simple example, the usual way, for example, in Italian, if I said, oggi sono andato a trovare mia suocera, a literal translation of that would be, I went to find my mother-in-law, which doesn't quite work in English. And obviously I'd need to find a correspondent. So in English, there'd be a few ways, but I suppose, but, you know, today I went to see my mother-in-law. So that's just a shade of use that increases quality in writing. Having said that, it is clear that il guardaroba dell'eloquenza, dove I pensieri nudi andavano a vestirsi, that is, the wardrobe of eloquence, where nude thoughts go to dress themselves. It is clear that eloquence can be a block, can get in the way, can interfere with writing a truth, your truth. That's by the wonderful Luigi Pirandello, that thought. So I put that up because you can always break rules. You can follow what you want to say, and don't let grammatical clarity obscure your vision, even though there's a balance to be had, and clearly grammatical command will help you get that clarity of that vision. So maybe it's more to do with the language. So I must admit, when I put up the description of this talk, I used the word strategies, and the strategies used to get to the point of having a book accepted by an Italian publisher. And there is this book, that lovely book. This is the lovely cover by an Italian artist, I should say. And that title means the songs they never play on the radio, and the publisher is on there. But actually, I obviously, as you realize, I didn't start writing to get published. This was a lovely, hard-earned byproduct of this journey. It just so happened that I arrived to have a manuscript that I thought was reasonable, and it would be silly not to send it around. So I sent it around, having already started something else, not expecting to hear anything, but indeed I did. Even though it was obviously had to be knocked into shape, and I had to have some help with some editing and things, which I'll talk to you about in a second. Clearly the emotional side of that came through. It spoke to somebody, and indeed it subsequently has maintained that emotional weight in the book. But whilst writing is a solitary activity, it really is, producing a book is a collaboration. And so my other piece of advice is to say to you that remember that it's very well worth having collaborators. I have Italian collaborators. I'm so lucky to have a first reader who read my texts, who was open, happy to criticize and encourage and speak frankly and sincerely. And these are difficult qualities to find in a first reader. In our friends obviously want to encourage us and not say things that they might feel were negative about something. So that was quite a precious find. I also, with the current book I'm working on, I'm working closely with an Italian who lives in London, who has worked in editing, and we're working really hard on the grammar whilst maintaining that thing I'm talking about, that sort of emotional truth that is there. And of course, it's slightly exotic. It's probably has a slightly exotic flavor, my version of Italian, but that in a way is what gives it it makes it unique. And that to me tells me that there are, just as there are a million people who will read a book and have a million interpretations of that book, there are a million writers who will want to express themselves, and they will have a unique journey with this language. And that to me strikes me as being something very, very exciting. And I would encourage everybody to try it. So I also run an event. I've done it for years, called Britalia Live, which is a music and literature event, which gives me a bit of a presence. I would now conclude, because we're coming up to, I think, about 30 minutes I've been talking, with this thought by Kaori Fujimoto, I have never been perfect, nor can I ever write anything perfect, but I can always be authentic. I realized that being real rather than flawless is the best thing I can do for myself, not just as a writer, but as a person. And I think that's really, really marvelous. And so here's this lovely thought from Hanif Qureshi. I'm going to read this one. The vocation of each writer is to describe the world as he or she sees it. Anything more than that is advertising. And that's the thing that Italian has given me. It's given me this possibility to avoid advertising and just speak my truth. More byproducts. I presented this book in Rome. My publisher is in Rome, which is just wonderful. Can you imagine? But also about 4 weeks ago, I was here in London at the Italian bookshop, and I presented my book there. And there we are, this lovely Italian public. And for the Italians who are watching right now, you know, what a wonderful, wonderful, warm bunch of people you are. But it was just really marvelous to be able to express these things with this Italian public, and that goes on. So another product is being able to interact with it. So before we switch back to see where we've got comments and any questions, these are some of the links. I have a website that is only really one page, but you'll be able to see all this stuff from the web page. But I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. The event is called Brutalia Live, and there are lots of interviews and events. Just follow the page to be updated. I do bilingual interviews. I've been doing interviews. So I spoke recently to Desi Icardi, who's an Italian author. I'm about, in fact, to speak to Simonetta Hornby. I spoke to Rachel Howarth, who's written this brilliant book about Mina, such an important cultural figure in Italy. So there's lots of interesting things there. I also run the Italian reading group at the London Library. So if you're interested in that, have a look at the London Library website. Now, and the last thing is actually just a request. My publisher is called Edizione Progetto Cultura. They're Roman, they're independent. Obviously, I think they're great. But we were talking about the possibility of starting a collana or series of second language writers, that is, those who write in Italian, specifically in Italian. So if you are out there, you do write in Italian, you don't have to be British, but if you write in Italian as a second language, please could you contact me? It's brutalialive@gmail.com, or find a way to contact me. You will be able to do that. So that's me done. Thank you very much. Grazie mille. Grazie infinite. Let me just come out of this and see if I can get back to where we are with the chat. Thank you very much. So let's have a look here. I'm going to come back to the beginning here. So, hi Martina, sorry if I didn't get to speak to you earlier on, East Barnet. So Mary, so true, even at a simple level, I would say things I wouldn't dream of saying in my mother tongue. You can adopt a different culture outlook as well as a different language. Martina, with the Beatles, yes, that's Saber. Saber's a massive Beatles fan. So yeah, well, we're all massive Beatles fans. It's what do they say? It's the Beatles world. We just live in it. Lorenzo, and this is to do with trying to dive too deeply into reading in a second language, which is and I think Lorenzo's about to make a really good point here. Such major works of literature, you know, such as the cardinal books of a culture, use language that would sound outdated or old-fashioned nowadays, and sometimes do not mirror actual spoken language, even back when they were written. Absolutely, Lorenzo. Yes, absolutely right. Emerson, brilliant. So I found somebody else who's done it. It's so rare you find people who do this, which is to read books that you already read in your target language. Perhaps it's really common, and I've got that completely wrong. It's just nobody had ever mentioned it. Martina, reading classics can actually have, if not a detrimental, I think definitely a negative effect on language learning, as you might start using terms and expressions that are no longer used in the modern language. Yes, and indeed, in my first drafts, Martina, I hadn't realized I'd been using some remote past conjugations of verbs that were out of use in Italian, but could have been used if it had made sense for the person who was saying those things. But if it was a conscious decision, it works. Yes, and grammar is a continually changing process. It's forever, ever changing. Incorrect, correct, these things are constantly shifting. Jumbalhiri indeed is I think was born in America but raised in the UK and has Bengali parents. Yes, indeed. In other words, yes, Mary, that's the book that she wrote, Jumbalhiri, in altre parole. It's a dual language text. It was a collection of books, articles she wrote for Internazionale about her journey with Italian. So that's a great thought. And thanks, Mary, you've put up the link there. Fabulous. Martina, I don't think writing is that solitary. I always feel that if I'm in the same room or in the same place, kind of spending time with my characters, a bit like reading a novel. Yeah, absolutely. I suppose I was thinking physically solitary, but no, it's such a wonderful thing, isn't it? Isn't it just the most wonderful thing when you start writing and you look up and like 3 hours have gone by because you've been talking to these people. Jumbalhiri speaks perfect Italian too. Yes, she does indeed. And I think she lived in Rome for a couple of years. That's great. Thank you, Emerson. Thanks. I'm glad that's given you some inspiration with your writing. So Martina says to me, to give my Beatles comment a bit more context, I'm actually a native German speaker and writing fiction in English now. Wow. Okay. Do publishing houses help authors with editing? Yes. No, it's not. They absolutely do. Yes, indeed. It's essential, really. So there's an in-house. I have a person who works with me, who edits my book, and it's kind of a conversation, obviously, because it's to do with keeping all the things we've been talking about with grammar and keeping things up to date, using the right sounds, the right versions of verbs, the right language, but also keeping the writer's kind of vision. Good. So I think that is all. There was a question. Oh yes, sorry. So Lorenzo, I saw that question. I've just answered it, haven't I? So I think we are. I think if that's okay, we will pause. We'll stop there. I would just like to thank you once again for listening. It's been a real pleasure. And let's, get in. Please, if you want to get in contact, please do. But enjoy the rest of the this Sunday, and enjoy the rest of the language show, which has been really marvelous. And hope to see you sometime soon. Thank you.